Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion with Angie Motshekga. She's the Basic Education Minister in South Africa. Minister, before the break, you explained very carefully where your powers begin and where they end, and how far you are able to use the big stick to get your MECs in provinces to work. Let's look at the question of the quality of education. We've spoken now about the issues of backlogs, why they're taking so long, and the questions of norms and standards. There's been a big complaint that the South African quality of education has gone down. We do poorly in maths and science. Our children are functionally literate when they come out of school because of the constant changes in our curriculum. The whole question of only requiring 33% to pass. The idea that South Africa's education system on paper means very, very little. What do you say to those criticisms, Minister?
And that's where I really find them completely uninformed. Because if they say they've gone down from here, were they any better before? We're moving from a very low base. The only difference that they now know that when we have to compete with the world, because before we never went to benchmark ourselves. And they now know that as a country, we don't perform quite well as compared to other countries, sometimes of the same economy.
Even poorer countries do better than we do.
Exactly, and that we now know. So they've not gone down. Instead, I mean, with the last PIL report that we had, we're actually making progress upwards from where we were when we started getting off into those benchmarks. You monitor our progress, we have an upward trend, but the problem, we're coming from a low base. And that's what the difference is.
Let's take maths and science. Historically, black South African kids were not taught math and science because the idea was never for us to go to university. Teachers were taught to teach textbooks and not curriculum. Where have we moved since then, Minister?
We've made great progress, Karima, if you have to really look at it. As I say, if you look at our assessments internationally, you look at where we were in 1999, look at where we are in 2011. We're making an upward move. The last results that came last year, we're saying we had the steepest growth and improvement in the team's test. So that the thing that I think upsets South Africans, they now know that they've not been doing well. And as even when we make progress, we're making progress from a very low base.
But we're making too slow progress, isn't it? We can do better, a lot better.
We can do a lot better, but it will be quite, because as I say, the last teams, we made the steepest improvement.
Compared to?
We're comparing with ourselves, because that's what the benchmark is all about. It's not to compete with other people. It's to say, when I run with every people, what is my time? Mm-hmm. So you're timing yourself if you're making any progress. We're saying, in terms from where we come from, we've made the greatest leap of all the countries that were benchmarked with us. And that should be really encouraging to us to say, we now know that we're not doing well. We went back to test ourselves against the world with instruments which are not controlled by us, which are showing that we're making progress. So we are making progress in that sense. You also look at, even as you say, that we always had huge disparities. 10 years down the line, we've doubled the number of kids who qualify with bachelors. So, which means we're again moving from a low base, but we're making progress, and great progress for that matter. And the 30%, I always say to people, was it any better? 33%.
But why should we settle for 33%?
No, and it's because we don't understand what the 33% means.
Spell it out for us.
You see, when, and I'll speak, and I hope you have patience with me. When you assess, when I say you have passed with 30%, it doesn't mean that you only know 30% of what you have studied. You could have read the whole book and still get 30%. What does it mean? It means the skills at which, because when you assess kids, you assess different skills. You have your basic skills, which are your recall, you have your intermediate skills, you have your high-level skills. So your high-level kids who can analyze, who can interpret, will get 80% from the same thing. I mean, if I was to give different kids a paragraph or a paragraph to read and answer questions, they will all have read that paragraph, but they won't score the same. The difference is the skills level at which they operate. They operate either at 30% means you operate at a basic level. You can recall, you can describe, but you can't analyze. So it doesn't mean that this is the amount of work that you know. It's a skills level at which you operate.
But why are we setting that skills level that low?
It's always been there. And fortunately, because of the outcry, it has helped me to even look internationally. I mean, in Australia, up to 17% because it's a skill level. It's not the amount of knowledge that you know. You can cover the whole book and still pass at 30 because it means you operate at that level. It has to do with your intellectual capacity. It has to do with quite a number of things. There are people that can't describe, can't recall every information. But if you say appreciate the full, you find that they are unable to operate at that level. So it's not skill level in terms of knowledge, it's operational skills that we're talking about.
So if we were to compare, for example, to the Australians, what would our percentages compare like?
You know, they even have 17% as a pass. Do you know that?
In
the skills
Australia?
level, yeah, they accept it as a pass. If you look at our 70%, I kept on saying to my parents, 30% it's as old as our education system. It's been there. It's 30%. It's in our certificates. If you look at your matric certificate, even if you wrote around 1976, you still have an F. It's a symbol. It's always been there. Actually, what Minister Pando did, improve the system because it was even 25% as a pass mark. And she just felt 25% was too low. And that's why then she ruled off 25% and removed, there was even standard grade at 25% as a pass mark. And because as I said, when people talk about this 25%, they speak about the amount of knowledge you know. They don't speak about the skills level at which you operate. There are people, you'll agree with me, even when you bring up kids, who will not be able to operate at some conceptual level because of their intellectual capacity. So I was saying, even if you had read everything, you might find that you are a person who can recall, who can memorize, but you are not able to analyze. And doesn't mean that you don't know anything. So the 30% is, I think, wrongly debated, but also it's as old as, it's not anything new. It's as old as our metric system.
Minister, let's move the discussion on a little bit. The question of teacher training is a big issue in South Africa. Again, historically, we know that most black teachers were taught in teacher training colleges. Some colleges were excellent, some were terrible. In 1994, we decided graduate teachers is the way to go. But we didn't necessarily capacitate the universities and their education departments with the monies to be able to train teachers, particularly teachers at foundational level, that important, first learning experiences of kids. What are we doing there, Minister, both in terms of resources and quality of training to ensure that your foundational teachers are actually your most revered in your system?
You're perfectly right. That in 1994, when you took over, looked at the teacher training colleges, felt that the quality is not what we want as a country. Then opted for university degrees. 95% of our teachers are well qualified, which is a very good standard, but it is not translating to classrooms and to the pedagogy. Because in terms of academic knowledge, they are good. What universities have not been able, as institutions of higher learning, whose focus is around research, it's not around basic practical skills. So what we realize we have to do is to strengthen the teaching skills and pedagogy, because they know, I mean, some of them have got master's degree, but if they have to teach kids how to write, they can't do it. So what we've done as a sector, in collaboration with teacher unions, we've formed a collaboration framework through which, with them, we are strengthening the inset part where, as in-service, we train them or we improve their pedagogy, because it's not the knowledge that they don't have. It's a classroom practice as to how, even if you are a third-year mathematician, you may find it difficult to teach a grade 3 math to understand maths, and that's what we're dealing with unions, and we are making great progress because, as I say, we're really working with unions in a way which is not threatening, not judging, but appreciating that there is a gap between knowledge and imparting that knowledge in our classrooms. I
like the words that you're using. You're saying not threatening, not judging, and yet it's the biggest teacher training union, SATU, an affiliate of COSATU, an ally of the ANC, that was disappointed that the president didn't reshuffle you when he reshuffled cabinet recently. They said that you had fallen down, you had not been able to perform, and these are comrades of yours that you sit with in other forums. Where is the level of engagement? Why is SATU demanding that you must be removed from your post?
No, but if you remember, the fallout with SATU had nothing to do with the department. It had much more to do with me firing the head of department. And when I interrogated them to say, why should you just walk into my office, think that if you instruct me to fire the department, I'll jump and run to the head office and say, DG, you are off. They said it's because the DG is interfering in our internal matters. And that's what they fall out. And that's what we're not talking about in public, to say all these things have nothing to do with, and that's why I really am not even fazed, because I know I discussed with them the origin of our fallout with SATU is around the head of department, because in the words of the SG, he was interfering in the election and organizational processes, therefore he's got to go. And I said to them, that has nothing to do with me. If you feel he interferes in your matters, go and sort it outside, because it has nothing to do with my relationship with the DG. And that's where the fallout came. So all the other things about breaking your agreements were used as reasons to be able to mobilize their constituents, because they can't go to their constituents and say the minister refused to fight DG because we're saying the DG is interfering in our side to a political process. And that's where the fallout is.
Now,
and that's why, as I say, I'm not even fazed by their call, because myself and them know where the fallout is.
when we look at the National Development Plan, it sketches a very big picture, obviously, of education, pretty much echoed by yourself. It outlines what needs to be done, but it talks about trade-offs, Minister. It talks about the fact that teachers will have to be in class teaching. There was a big debate following that about bringing back some kind of monitoring system, whether it's the inspectorate or some other mechanism, to make sure that teachers are in class doing what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, there was the debate in the ANC that is still ongoing around making education an essential service, which people see as a way for you to just slap unions down. How, Minister, are you going to balance these contradictions? Protecting the rights of teachers to strike because they are workers, but also ensuring that children's education is not sacrificed at the cost of labor action. How are you going to see to both demands?
Yeah. For a strange reason, I'm agreeing with Satu on the understanding of what the issues are. Our sense, and my sense, that people don't understand where the real problem lies. The real problem does not lie in whether teachers strike or not, because I think it's their right, and we're agreeing that they, as workers, I was a teacher, we fought very hard for those rights for teachers. So I agree with them that if there's an issue, they can use that right. The question of monitoring teachers has nothing to do with the inspectorate. The system in education is broad enough to allow the principal. So what we need is decisive leadership.
From the principal level, school level.
The principal is there 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, must be able to oversee teachers. The current structure of education enables even the senior management of school to supervise without anybody from each side. When I was a teacher, we only had the principal. There was no senior head of department, there was no deputy president, deputy chair curriculum. The new administration put up a very solid system in schools to make sure that schools can look after themselves. At the district level, we have what we call the IDSOs, who are there to monitor and support the policies. You have the subject advisors. So the structure itself is adequate. It has to be used to the full. It's adequate to enable class supervision, class monitoring, class support.
So it's the individual leadership set skills that needs to be brought to
where things work well. I mean, what schools are not working well simply because there's no inspectorate even for them, but the schools are running well. The schools in townships which are doing well are not doing well because there's an inspector for those schools. They're doing well because there's leadership, there's commitment, and that's what we require. There's also a tool that what we're discussing, what is being discussed now, there must be a monitoring tool for other promotion, for incentives, what we call the IQMS. We say the tool, the way it's implemented, it's not very helpful because it's peers assessing each other for the sake of increments. And people as colleagues don't even want to judge each other. And that's what I think is the weak point.
So you have to have independent assessment, is that correct?
I think so.
Minister?
For promotional purposes, for bonuses, but in terms of supervising and get systems to work, the structure as it is, if it's fully utilized, the way it's being utilized in other schools, for me it's adequate.